The Auburn basketball season is here, and we're going to tell you what expectations need to be this season.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We're joined by the Isaac Shade, host of Locked On College Basketball. Congratulations to you. College basketball season is back. It starts Wednesday night tonight for the Auburn Tigers. And Isaac, this is a team where you look at the roster that Bruce Pearl has put together. Double-digit seniors. I mean, it almost feels like they're all in on this year with Janai Broome coming back, as well as, it seems like a larger role for Denver Jones. Dylan Cardwell's got another year left of eligibility. I mean, this on paper, I think, is the best roster Bruce Pearl has had since he's been here, and I'm including the year he had Jabari and Walker on a roster.
Zach, what I love about this Auburn roster for BP is the fact that when you look at who wins in college basketball right now, it's teams that are talented, yes, but it's teams that are also experienced. And when you can find not just one of those things, it's not an or part of the equation, it's an and, then you're in the sweet spot. And that's what the Auburn Tigers have this year. It is experienced talent. That, sure, you bring in a Tae Hot Pettiford, and I think that's a big part of what can help. But yeah, I mean, you look at it and you've just fifth-year dudes and fourth-year seniors out the yin-yang, and that gives me a lot of hope and encouragement for Auburn this year.
Yeah, so something we talked about before we clicked record, and this is, I mean, all of this is kind of new for Auburn fans. I mean, just to be competitive in a situation where you compete for an SEC championship year in and year out, like, that is relatively new to Auburn folks. But one thing that Bruce Pearl has done, and he's had some years where he's put together, tougher non-conference schedules. But I mean, it's nothing compared to what Auburn's about to go through. And even with the open, I don't think Vermont is a slouch by any stretch of the imagination. But obviously Houston is one of the big ones that was circled. They go and play Houston at a neutral site place in Houston. Figure that one out Saturday night. But I mean, what do you think, just from the national point of view, like Auburn fans' expectations should be about this team as far as how you evaluate how good this team is with this non-conference schedule?
Auburn fans, Zach, have to not be box score lookers this year. And here's what I mean by that. You can't just look at the wins and losses and judge this team's ability. Yeah. This is a team that's going to take some losses. And I don't mean that about Auburn. I mean, any team would take losses against this schedule. Because as you said, it doesn't just start with Houston. It starts with Vermont, who the last time they didn't win at least a share of the American East, I went and looked it up, was 2015-16. Zach, This Vermont team is perennially good, and they get back two of their top three scorers. And it's I heard somebody describe this Vermont team as very Yale-like, and that should strike some fear into Auburn fans' hearts.
Come on,
unfortunately.
Isaac. What are we doing?
I apologize.
What are we doing?
But look, when you look at this non-conference schedule, for example, the SEC is now the only power conference that hasn't jumped to 20 games. There's just 18 conference games in the SEC. But that means you get a little more flexibility. You get 13 non-con games. 7 of those, Zach, are going to be against power conference or equivalent competition, and potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, I counted it up, potentially 6 preseason top 14 teams. Houston is number 4, Iowa State 5. The second Maui game will either be North Carolina or Dayton. Carolina's 9th. Dayton's a really good team that you can't sleep on. Yeah. And then the final Maui game is either back-to-back reigning national champion UConn, who's 3rd preseason, or Michigan State or Memphis or Colorado. Obviously, you got to go to Duke. That's never easy. You play Ohio State, who should be ranked. They knocked off Texas on opening night. And then against Purdue, who's the reigning national runner-up in 14th. So, Zach, I mean, that's just like half of the non-conference schedule, and we haven't even mentioned SEC play, which is going to be absurd. So,
yeah. I mean, the SEC is good at basketball now, which is super, super fun. But so when you look at this roster, I think they brought a lot of guys back. They've got some talented freshmen as well as guys that they brought in through the portal. I mean, this is a deep team, which is typically like what we've grown to expect with Bruce Pearl and how he likes to manage a roster. But it usually does take him until about conference play to figure out what exactly that rotation needs to look like. You can't play with lineups with this gauntlet of a non-conference schedule. What do you expect that to look like?
Yeah, that is the catch-22 of being a team that's willing to go play a tough schedule while also living in this transfer portal era, because you got to figure out what your piece is, despite the fact of having so much experienced players. You still have to figure out how all the pieces fit. And like I think one of the biggest compliments I can pay this team, Zach, is I've sat down to try to put together Auburn's starting five. I don't know how many times this preseason, and I come back with a different result each time. And I think that's a good thing, and is telling of the point that you're making, where like my starting five right now is different than the starting five we've seen in either exhibition game. And part of that, what I would say that I like about this roster in one word is versatility. I think you can roll out a whole bunch of different things, but as long as you got my man Janai Broome out there, you're in good shape.
Yeah, Janai Broome. I mean, are you buying where he is on some of these preseason lists? I mean, there are some folks,
I'm not.
I mean, some lists are saying he's the best player in college basketball, and that seems like a lot, but you look at what his production has been, and it's like there's an argument for it.
Yeah, I'm not buying where most people have it, because I think most people have him too low. The ones that do have him at the very tip top is where I would go. Zach, let's even beyond the eye test, let's go analytics on it. Last year, he was second in the nation in player efficiency rating, behind only some dude named Zach Edey. And it's like that level with Janai Broome. And it's because he can do it on offense. He can do it on defense. That, when we think a Bruce Pearl team, we think get out and run. We think bomb away from three. We think explosive offense. The Tigers' calling card last year, and it was a strong offense, was the defense, right? Finished sixth nationally at KenPom in defensive efficiency. That's the highest defensive efficiency ever for Auburn in the KenPom era. And yet they're even more highly rated this preseason. And it's Janai Broome leading the way in that. So he is a true two-way player that can do a little bit of everything, fill out the stat sheet, and make everyone around him better.
Yeah. Is there, are there any teams on Auburn's non-conference slate? I mean, you just read them all off, that you say, okay, like this is a team that they may have a number next to their name, or they're kind of being looked at or labeled as a solid team, but like, that this may not be as quality of as an opponent when it comes to like presenting resumes to the selection committee when it's all said and done?
The majority of them are. The one that I'm a little hesitant on right now is Purdue.
Interesting.
Because, obviously they lose Zach Edey. We just mentioned his name. And they do bring back multiple like high level players. They get back their entire starting backcourt in Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. Trey Kaufman-Wren is going to slide right in to start for Zach Edey where he was. But they lose a key piece in Mason Gillis, who transferred to Duke. And I'm just not convinced that like Braden Smith is going to have to be their dude this year. And I don't know yet that he's going to be at that level, but I'm convinced like Houston is legit. Iowa State, totally. Their defense is insane. Houston and Iowa State are probably number 1 and 2 in the country in defensive efficiency. So those are big tests. Depending on who you get in that third Maui game, UConn is legit. I think I'm a little bit lower on them than some other national folks are, but Michigan State, Memphis, and Colorado are all a step back this year. So if that game's not UConn, it's not quite as good of a resume thing. But the rest of those, Duke, yes. Ohio State, I think, is going to continue to ascend.
Yeah.
Big time. So Zach, yeah, I think for the vast majority, I'm nitpicking even there by picking Purdue, but yeah, I think this non-con slate is going to hold up on Selection Sunday.
All right. So which addition that Auburn made this offseason could help Auburn take that next step to compete for the SEC? That's coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Isaac, can you imagine buying tickets anywhere other than on the Game Time app?
No, I can't.
No, it makes me mad just thinking about it.
It's silly.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be wasting time. You'd be wasting money, because Game Time, look, they've got the price match guarantee. If you find a similar seat in the same row and section cheaper somewhere else, you're going to get 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Z Biotics. Nobody likes to feel groggy the next day, Isaac. No. Nobody likes to feel groggy the next day after a night of drinking responsibly. So I don't know how Locked On found these people, but Z Biotics, they've got this team of super smart people. They use science for this, Isaac. Science to create this elixir, this potion that you drink before a night of drinking responsibly. And then you wake up the next day, you feel great. You feel refreshed. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code LockedOnCollege at checkout. Once again, zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. For your second listen, go check out our folks at Locked On College Basketball. Isaac and Andy, you guys do a fantastic job. So which offseason edition stood out to you the most? I mean, the Tigers were certainly active in the transfer portal. There's no question about it. They also added some freshmen, Tae Hot Pettiford specifically, who I'm super stoked about.
Yes,
but which addition to the roster are you saying, yes, this is one that I'm kind of paying extra attention to?
I've really gone back and forth, Zach, between JP Pegues and Miles Kelly on this. I'll make the pitch for Pegues first, but he's not my pick. Spoiler alert. JP Pegues is the Virginia killer. And here's what I mean. A couple years ago, I vividly remember JP Pegues hitting a shot to knock Virginia out of the NCAA tournament after a silly inbounds pass from Kihei Clark. And he transferred. It's funny now because he comes from Furman, who Auburn played in one of their exhibition games.
Right.
I think he is going to be legit. He's been the starting point guard in each of those exhibition opportunities. But I think for him, it's going to be like very solid. My choice, though, is Miles Kelly, because I think even though he hasn't started either of these exhibition games, he's the dude that I think is going to be the offensive stud that you're going to be able to turn to, whether off the bench or in the starting lineup. I think he's going to get starters level minutes, or at least should. Has been really productive for Georgia Tech, particularly, the past 2 years. I know Georgia Tech as a program hasn't been phenomenal, but man, they had some big time moments last year in Damon Stoudemire's first year, knocked off North Carolina. I feel like they knocked off Duke, if I can remember. And Miles Kelly is a key part of that. And I think that he just, not only is he a phenomenal basketball player, but I think he fits what Bruce Pearl does. And that's what you're always looking for, is not just about just straight up skill and talent, but how does this player fit with who we are and what we do? And I think it's a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, the guard situation is going to be interesting because we've heard so many different things with, JP Pegues was kind of seen like he's the guy that they brought in to run the point, but then you hear about like Denver Jones.
That's right.
Bringing the ball down the floor. Is he going to take a larger step? I mean, we saw him come on towards the end of last year. He kind of finally found that shot. And now it seems like the offense is flowing pretty good when he's bringing the ball down the floor. Tae Hot Pettiford sounds like he's a little too good to keep off of the floor. Right. You got to give him minutes. So how they handle the 1 and 2 positions, I think, is going to be the most interesting thing to watch these first few weeks of the season for Auburn.
And in this day and age, Zach, you know what you do if you got too many guys at one position? You just keep playing positionless basketball. So if you're like struggling because it's like, well, I know we got to get CBM some minutes, and I know we got all these dudes. Just go small and let Janai cook with them in a death lineup, a la Steph Curry, Warriors, and all those guys, right? Like, do it, because that can offset some of like let's talk Alabama, who's going to bring a lot of size to the table. Run circles around them and make Nate Oates' head spin, right? Like, just what if you're overloaded in the backcourt? Who cares? Let's make them our 3 and our 4 at times. You can't do that game long, but Bruce Pearl is the type of coach that's going to say, all right, what's my personnel and how do they best help us win a crap ton of basketball games?
Yeah. What are your thoughts about Janai playing minutes at the 4 this year? If they kind of put Dylan Cardwell out there at the 5 with him,
I think it is something that we will see. Part of that is I think that is probably more where Janai projects a next level. is more of a power forward kind of thing. And so I think even for his sake, it would be a good thing for him to get some minutes there at the 4. I think we've definitely got to at least see effort to make that happen, to have both Cardwell and Broom on the floor together. And again, in this day and age, there could be some interchangeability with that of who's in the paint, who's floating outside, and what each of their skill sets are to make Auburn cook a little bit. But yes, 100%, we need to see Janai slide to the 4 here and there.
Yeah. So you mentioned Alabama, and you mentioned the SEC's going to be a pretty impressive conference when it comes down to it this year. Our friends at FanDuel, they've got Alabama and Auburn as the 2 best odds to win the regular season SEC championship. Do you think that's fair? Do you agree with FanDuel there? You know, Alabama and Auburn as the top 2 teams in the conference, or do you think one of them might be rated a little too high? Maybe a team's rated too low. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think they are both properly rated, Zach. Okay. Alabama brings in a ton. One of Alabama's biggest deficiencies last year was their defense, right? The offense is always going to be there under Nate Oates. But the defense was just sorely lacking. And so they bring in, just some big time help there from Rutgers, and going to be able to find more capability there in the front court. I think Jaron Stevenson's going to take a step forward as well as a sophomore. Nick Pringle's gone. He was a little bit kind of whatever in the post there. And so gonna be nice with Cliff Omori coming over from Rutgers. And so that'll be helpful for them. But even beyond that, I think that is your top 2. And I kind of love that. Like, Alabama could be an epicenter, not only of the SEC, but of college basketball this year. Because legitimately, I think both of these teams are top, if not top 5, definitely top 10 capability. But then what's interesting about the SEC in totality is there's a bunch of question marks, but with potentially high ceilings. I mean, we're talking possibly double-digit NCAA tournament teams here, Zach. And I think, like,
seems insane. It seems almost like not possible.
Right. But here's the deal. In this day and age, the selection committee is getting smarter. And as kind of we alluded to with Auburn's record, they look now beyond just the W and the L, and they look at wins above bubble, and they look at advanced metrics and see, like, it's not just about, I mean, yes, at some point losses add up.
Well, the conversation about college basketball has changed in the last 5 years. I mean, it's so analytics heavy and it's so accessible now. I think Ken Palm's kind of led the way with, like, how accessible this information is now, and a quad 1 win versus, a quad 3. I mean, just the amount of information out there now. The vocabulary, I think it's just a lot more educated now than it was maybe even 3 or 4 years ago.
Yes, 100% it is. And that's what allows you as a head coach to feel more comfortable getting a gauntlet of games in front of you. But legitimately, like, I think Cal's going to have things rolling at Arkansas in year 1. That is a very, very
Are you used to saying that yet? Cal at Arkansas?
I'm not. Just even seeing him in red, like,
it's weird, man.
Because even before Kentucky, he was blue, right? And so there's all that. I am sell on Texas A&M. I'm out on the Aggies. They SEC lost 4 games on opening night, Zach, including A&M down at UCF on a true road game. I think Tennessee is going to be strong. They won't have as high a ceiling as last year. Yeah. I think Texas is starting 5 is really good, but they don't. Something Andy and I have been talking a lot about on Locked On College Basketball is they don't have a ton of depth. I think Kentucky is going to be a lot better than people expect them to be. Mark Pope is just a good dude, and he's a good coach. Yeah. And so that'll be fun to see Kentucky basketball be what Kentucky basketball is supposed to be.
Yeah. So hopefully a strong season starts tonight for the Auburn Tigers. Isaac, if Auburn folks want more national college basketball coverage, where do they go?
Locked On College Basketball is your stop for everyday college basketball content. That's us here at Locked On, baby. Your team every day. That's what we do. You can follow me at Isaac Shade. You can see it if you're watching there on YouTube. And you can check out our guy, Andy Patton, who's my great co-host on that show as well. Just like Zach here on Locked On Auburn, we're coming at you 5 days a week and whenever we can, late night, Monday night, because Gonzaga and Baylor tipped off at 11:30 Eastern.
Wow, that's dedication to the craft right there. Absolutely. Yeah, the same way you're consuming this show right now, you can go find Locked On College Basketball, and I highly recommend that you do. Please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you tonight as I go live right after Auburn and Vermont. Until then, this has been Locked On Auburn.